I never thought my life was perfect, but I figured it was solid. Stable. The kind of marriage people describe as comfortable, with a rhythm of daily life that felt predictable in the best way. My wife, Emily, and I had been together for 11 years, married for 8. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but there was never a moment when I doubted her loyalty. Not once. We met in our late 20s, both young and ambitious. She worked in marketing, sharp as a blade in the corporate world, while I built a career in software development. I always admired her drive, her way of lighting up a room with her confidence. Even after all these years, I still found myself watching her when she wasn't looking, amazed that someone like her had chosen someone like me. Our life was structured but fulfilling. We had our routines: Saturday morning coffee runs, Netflix marathons on lazy Sundays, and spontaneous date nights when work didn't drain us dry. She was affectionate in small ways, kisses on the cheek while I was working, a lingering touch on my shoulder as she passed by. That's how I knew we were still good. Or so I thought. Lately, something had shifted. Subtle things at first. Emily had always been a night owl, but she started staying up later than usual, glued to her phone. When I'd turn over in bed, she'd quickly lock the screen and pretend to be scrolling mindlessly through Instagram. She'd always been social, but her work happy hours suddenly doubled in frequency. And the way she dressed for them, she'd always been stylish, but now it felt like she was dressing for attention, not just for fun. Still, I pushed the thoughts away. She was stressed. Work had been piling up. Maybe she just needed an outlet. Then came the first real crack. Last Friday, she told me she was grabbing drinks with her colleagues after work. No big deal, I'd heard that excuse 100 times before. But when I called her around 10:30 p.m. to check in, she didn't answer. That wasn't like her. Emily always picked up, even if it was just to tell me she'd be home soon. When she finally walked in close to midnight, she smelled different. Not just the scent of perfume in a crowded bar, but something else, something faint and unfamiliar. Her lipstick was a little smudged, her blouse slightly askew. I wanted to ask, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just watched her as she dropped her purse on the counter, kicked off her heels, and crawled into bed next to me like nothing had changed. The next day, I brushed it off. One late night wasn't a crime. Then, the second crack appeared. A few days later, I noticed she had changed her phone password. We had never been the type of couple to check each other's phones, but would always known each other's codes just in case. When I casually asked why, she shrugged and said, "Just being cautious." Work stuff. Work stuff. Right. I tried to ignore the growing unease in my gut. But then, there was the biggest red flag of them all, the one I couldn't explain away. One afternoon, Emily was in the shower, and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Just once. A single message notification. I wasn't looking for trouble, but my eyes landed on the preview. Unknown number, can't wait to see you again. Same time this week? I froze. This was it. The moment before everything in my life came crashing down. A single text, and suddenly, my world was a different place. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was a coworker, a friend, something innocent. But deep down, I knew better. And I knew I had to find out the truth. I spent the next 2 days pretending everything was normal. It wasn't. Emily was acting like nothing had changed, kissing me in the morning before work, texting me about what to pick up for dinner, laughing at whatever dumb thing we were watching on TV. But I knew. That text sat in my brain like a splinter, and every time she smiled at me, every time she touched me, it burrowed in deeper. I had to be sure before I confronted her. Before I blew up our marriage over what might be, what? A misunderstanding? A harmless message from a friend? No. I knew better. So, I started watching. Not obviously. Just enough to pick up on the things I'd been too blind to see before. Emily was careful. Too careful. Her phone never left her side, even when she went to the bathroom. She started working late more often, coming home with the same faint scent of alcohol and something I couldn't place. When she showered, I noticed a new razor in the bathroom, a men's brand. That one hit me harder than it should have. I used electric razors. Always had. And then there was the receipt. It was Friday night, and Emily had left for another work event. I was restless, pacing the house, trying not to check my phone every 5 seconds. Then, in the kitchen, I saw her purse sitting on the counter. Open. I told myself I wouldn't look. That it wasn't me. That I wasn't the kind of guy who snooped through his wife's things. But I already knew something was wrong. And pretending otherwise wasn't going to change reality. So, I reached inside and pulled out the first thing my fingers touched, a folded up piece of paper. A receipt. A hotel bar. Wednesday night. 2 drinks. Paid in cash. Emily never paid in cash. My stomach clenched, but I wasn't done. I checked her location history on our shared account. She'd turned off tracking. When did she turn off tracking? I had no idea. That was it. That was all the proof I needed. I was going to confront her. But I didn't expect to see it with my own eyes. The moment of truth. Saturday morning, Emily woke up early. Too early for a weekend. "I'm meeting Sarah for brunch," she said casually, pulling on a pair of jeans and a loose sweater. We haven't caught up in ages. Sarah was her best friend. The only problem? I ran into Sarah at the grocery store yesterday. She was flying out of town for work. Emily was lying to my face. I played it cool. Kissed her on the forehead, told her to have fun. Then, I waited exactly 5 minutes before grabbing my keys and following her. I don't know what I expected. Maybe she'd actually meet someone for coffee. Maybe I'd realize I was just being paranoid. But no. I followed her to a small parking lot near the downtown district. She parked, sat in her car for a few minutes, then stepped out, glancing around like she was checking for someone. She didn't see me. Then, a black sedan pulled up. And out stepped a man I'd never seen before. Tall. Well-dressed. Confident. Emily lit up when she saw him. Smiling, laughing, touching his arm as they walked toward the hotel. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was routine. A carefully planned affair. And I had just caught them in the act. I felt sick. My chest was tight, my hands clenched around the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to storm inside, grab him by the collar, demand to know who the hell he was and why he thought he could touch my wife. But another part of me, the smarter part, knew this wasn't the time. Not yet. I needed everything. Not just suspicions. Not just a receipt. I needed proof. And then, I needed to decide exactly what kind of hell I was about to unleash. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had just watched my wife meet another man. Not in a casual way. Not in an old friend kind of way. No, this was different. The way she smiled at him, the way she touched his arm like he belonged to her, that was intimacy. That was something she hadn't given me in months. I could have followed them inside. I could have made a scene right then and there, but I held back. I needed more than just a confrontation in a hotel lobby. I needed to look her in the eyes and make her say it. So, I went home and waited. Hours later. Emily walked in like nothing had happened. She tossed her purse on the counter, sighed like she'd had a long morning, then went straight to the fridge. I just stood there. Watching. Waiting. "You're home early," she said, taking out a bottle of water. Her voice was light, casual. "Fake." "Yeah," I said flatly. "Brunch must have been nice." She turned, sipping from the bottle. "Yeah, it was great. Sarah's doing good." I just stared at her, letting the lie hang in the air between us. Then I pulled out my phone, opened my gallery, and slid it across the counter. Her eyes flicked down. The color drained from her face. On the screen was a photo I had taken from my car. Emily. Laughing. Standing too close to that man. Walking into a hotel. I saw her throat move as she swallowed. Who is he? I asked, my voice eerily calm. She blinked. What? Who the fuck is he, Emily? Her hand trembled slightly as she set down the water bottle. Steve. No, I cut her off. Don't lie to me. Not again. I watched you. I saw you get in his car. I saw you walk into that goddamn hotel. She opened her mouth, probably to lie again, but then something in my face must have told her that wasn't going to work this time. Her lips pressed together. And then, she did something I didn't expect. She sighed. Like she was annoyed. Like she had been caught speeding and not caught ruining our marriage. I felt something inside me snap. How long? I demanded. She rubbed her temples. Steve, I don't. How long, Emily? She flinched. Then, in a small, tired voice. 6 months. I closed my eyes. 6. Fucking. Months. Who is he? I repeated. A coworker, she admitted, shifting uncomfortably. It just happened. I laughed. A dry, humorless laugh. It just happened? I repeated. You tripped and fell onto his dick, is that it? Her face twisted in frustration. It's not like that, Steve. Oh, really? I folded my arms. Then tell me what it's like. She hesitated. Then, she finally really looked at me, and I saw something in her expression that made my stomach turn. It wasn't guilt. It was resentment. It hasn't been working between us, she muttered. You don't even try anymore. We don't talk. We don't connect. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest. Oh, so it's my fault? She exhaled sharply. That's not what That's exactly what you're saying, I snapped. You want to blame me? Fine. But let me ask you something, Emily. How many times have you looked me in the eyes over the last 6 months and told me you loved me? She didn't answer. I took a step closer. How many times have you kissed me, knowing you just came from him? She flinched. Good. How many times did you crawl into bed next to me, I continued, voice low, dangerous, after being with him? Did you ever even shower first? Her eyes filled with tears, but I had no sympathy left for her. You don't get to cry, I said coldly. Not when you're the one who destroyed this marriage. She wiped her face and finally said it. I think we should separate. Silence. The words hit me like a brick wall. She wasn't even fighting for us. She had already chosen him. Emily's words hung in the air, suffocating the space between us. I think we should separate. That was it. No begging. No remorse. Just a cold, matter-of-fact decision, one she had already made long before this conversation. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was premeditated. I had spent weeks, months, convincing myself that maybe I was imagining things. That maybe she was just going through a phase. That maybe, just maybe, our marriage was salvageable. But standing there, watching her wipe away crocodile tears, I felt something inside me die. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight for a woman who had already moved on. But I also wasn't going to walk away quietly. She had spent the last 6 months lying to my face. Making me feel like I was crazy. Gaslighting me into thinking I was the problem. She wanted a separation? Fine. But I was going to make damn sure she regretted ever crossing me. The setup. I didn't say much after she dropped that bombshell. Just nodded, muttered something about needing space, and walked out of the house. But inside, my mind was racing. If she wanted out, she wasn't going to walk away clean. First, I needed to gather evidence. Not just for my own satisfaction, but to make sure that when this separation turned into a divorce, she wouldn't be walking away with a single cent more than she deserved. So, I did what any rational, betrayed husband would do. I played dumb. For the next few days, I acted as if I was still processing. I let her believe I was heartbroken and lost. She, of course, felt relieved, like she had control of the situation. Like she had the upper hand. She had no idea I had already spoken to a lawyer. She had no idea I was digging through her digital footprint. And she sure as hell had no idea that I had installed a small hidden camera in the corner of our bedroom. Because, you see, Emily was sloppy. She had no guilt about what she was doing. And now that she believed she was getting away with it, she didn't even bother to cover her tracks anymore. So, I let her play her little game. And I recorded everything. The fallout. 2 weeks later, Emily fucked up. She thought I was at work. Thought she had all the time in the world. But I had left my phone at home on purpose so I could come back unexpectedly and walk right into the middle of her little fantasy world. And sure enough, there she was. Not just texting him. Calling him. Laughing like a love-struck teenager, twirling her hair like a schoolgirl while she lay in our bed, the same bed she once told me was sacred. I stepped into the doorway and just stood there. She didn't even notice me at first. She was too busy whispering into the phone. Until I cleared my throat. The way she jumped was almost comical. Her eyes went wide, her face drained of color, and she immediately hung up the phone. Steve. I held up a hand. Don't. She knew. She knew, in that moment, that it was over. And then I pulled out my laptop. I didn't say anything as I turned the screen toward her, hit play, and watched her expression shatter as she realized what she was looking at. Footage of her. In this exact room. With him. She covered her mouth. Where did you get that? I smiled. You should really check your surroundings before you bring your boyfriend into our home. Her breath hitched. Steve, No, Emily, I said. You don't get to explain. And then I dropped the final bombshell. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You're getting nothing. No alimony. No house. No sympathy. Her face twisted in panic. Steve, please. We can talk about this. I laughed. Laughed. Talk? You mean like how you talked to me before you started screwing your coworker? Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time, she looked truly scared. Because she knew I wasn't playing anymore. She had expected a weak, heartbroken husband who would let her walk away on her terms. But instead, she was looking at a man who had just taken away everything she thought she was entitled to. She opened her mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to scream, but I just shook my head. Pack your shit, I said. I want you gone by the end of the day. And then I walked out. For good. Emily was still in shock when I left the room. I could hear her ragged breathing, the shuffling of her feet as she tried to process what had just happened. I gave her 1 hour. 1 hour to pack. 1 hour to process that her perfect little double life had just collapsed in on itself. When I walked back into the bedroom, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, our bed, with a suitcase open beside her. She had packed, but barely. Her hands were clasped together, trembling slightly. She looked up at me, and I could see the emotions fighting for dominance: anger, shame, regret, panic. She swallowed hard. Steve, we need to talk. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Talk about what, Emily? The fact that you blew up our marriage for some asshole who probably won't even want you now that you're single? She flinched. It wasn't like that. I let out a sharp laugh. Then tell me. What was it like? I'm dying to hear the justification for 6 months of lying, gaslighting, and fucking another man while coming home to me every night. She opened her mouth. Closed it. She knew there was nothing she could say that would fix this. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. I rolled my eyes. Oh, right. It just happened. Like you tripped and fell into bed with him. You must think I'm the dumbest man alive. She stood up, anger flickering in her eyes now. I wasn't happy, Steve, she snapped. I felt lonely. You stopped seeing me, stopped making me feel like I mattered. There it was. The blame. I took a step closer, keeping my voice steady. So, instead of talking to me, your husband, you found some random guy to fill that void? That's your excuse? She bit her lip, looking away. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed in disbelief. Emily, you destroyed me. You made me question my own sanity. Do you know how many times I thought maybe I was just being paranoid? That maybe I was the problem? Do you have any fucking idea what that does to a person? Tears welled in her eyes. I know, she whispered. I know I messed up. Messed up? I repeated, shaking my head. Emily, you burned everything to the ground. And now you have the audacity to stand there and act like you're the victim? She sank back down onto the bed, covering her face with her hands. I never wanted this to end like this. I stared at her, at the woman I had spent the last 8 years of my life loving, and felt nothing. No pity. No sadness. Just an overwhelming sense of relief. I sat down across from her, my voice calm. Let's be real, Emily. If I hadn't caught you today, would you have ever told me the truth? She didn't answer. I nodded. That's what I thought. She wiped her face, her shoulders shaking. Do you really want a divorce? I let the silence stretch between us before I answered. Yes. Her breath hitched, like she had been hoping I'd say something else. I stood up. The lawyer will contact you. You'll be getting nothing, Emily. No house, no alimony, no fresh start funded by me. You wanted to move on? Go ahead. But you're doing it alone. She stared up at me, her lower lip trembling. Steve, is there really no way back from this? I looked her in the eyes one last time. No, Emily. There isn't. She sucked in a sharp breath, and for the first time, real regret flashed across her face. But it was too late. I grabbed my jacket, walked to the door, and paused. Oh, and one more thing, I said, turning back. You should probably warn your boyfriend that his wife will be getting a package in the mail soon. With all the proof of what you two have been up to. Her eyes widened in horror. I smirked. Happy ending, huh? And with that, I walked out. For good.